Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is your host, Gabriel Marrero, and I'm glad you could join me today. This is a special episode today, or a somber episode, I should say, considering that I'm recording on October 7th, 2024, the 1-year anniversary of the Operation Al-Aqsa Flood and the subsequent Palestinian genocide. This episode is going to be a little more dedicated, just mainly focusing on the conflict and the genocide, the human rights abuses. I do want to say before we continue with this episode, if I do sound a bit off, I don't know if I'm dealing with any illnesses or maybe allergic reactions, but my voice and my throat has been a bit off. But yeah, I'm not ill or anything, no fever, so I'm just going to continue. This episode, we'll see how long I can record it without my voice giving out, so it might not be too long. I only have a couple articles, but mainly I'm just focusing on the events that have transpired since the last episode, which was in September, up until now. Because again, many things have been escalating. At least, for this first part, I want to talk at least about just the year in reflection. I mean, what else is there to say? This has been a year of heartbreak and tragedy and human suffering and misery. And not just that, also just gaslighting. I mean, that's what other word do you want to say it? It's just gaslighting and just complete avoidance and denial. Rationalizations. It's just like this last year or so, and this is the one thing where it's a little more personal, where I have to be more mindful of my mental health, because it's not exactly good for me to constantly be following these subject matters, even though this is the work that I want to dedicate myself towards. But it's just, it's not as difficult to see the suffering. What's difficult is to see people surrounding me, people in my personal life, either just not knowing about it or just trying to ignore it or telling me to ignore it. I get it that there's some people who that's not the issue if people don't know about it. Because I have friends who recognize the suffering and they don't support it, but they're just not following it as closely because, of course, they want to maintain some peace and sanity. And I get that. That I don't mind. But from other people who just want to ignore it because it's not their problem, I won't personally know too many people, and I try to avoid them who try to support it. I do have some extended family members who are Jewish, and they're a bit younger, that I've tried to at least again, not saying to anything radical. I'm not bullying anybody. I'm just speaking very plainly, speaking very respectfully about their religion, because they are Jewish, trying to highlight the history of Zionism in this state Israel with official reporting. Again, people treat me like I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I'm just showing you specific reporting. And still, they're really, again, I don't think there's anything else I can do. If they're just going to be stuck with it, with these beliefs, that's just what they have to make, the peace that they have to make with. Because, it's, Israel is heading towards disaster and collapse, and it seems like they're going to take everybody down with them. It's just, this is a death cult. This is ISIS with nukes. I mean, that's literally what Israel is. It's Jewish ISIS. And I shouldn't be saying these things so publicly, because there could be serious ramifications down the line. But I'm sorry, man. That's what having courage is, right? That's what having conviction is. Speaking out like this at the cost of my reputation and my relationships, because this is evil. This is so clearly wrong and immoral. And as long as it takes someone to speak out against it. So that's just what I have to say. And I know this is a very strong start, very strong opening. Again, it's just I don't know how anybody can cope with it. That's the one way that people cope with it. It's just not seeing it and just avoiding it. Of course, I can't. I can't allow myself to be complacent like that and to be ignorant of it. But it's just, especially considering my background, having grown up in white suburban areas, it's just startling to me just to see the avoidant or dismissive attitude towards it. And again, being a person of color, being a somebody who was a first generation American, my parents were immigrants. It's just striking to me, because if this is the attitude they have towards Palestinians, and I'm Dominican, and as it stands currently, we're not on America's shit list right now, but it's just like if it were my people getting bombed and exterminated, like this is the same attitude that they would have. And it's just like, again, this is something that maybe isn't as spoken about, but I'll at least highlight on it. It's just like the race relations that are coming out of this, because BLM is one thing, right? Because BLM is, it can be more about like police violence. And of course, white people recognize, they have atoned, right, for the massacres and the years of slavery, or at least they pretend to have atoned. But when it comes to like black people in America, it's not as racially hostile, at least not yet, because the conditions of decline haven't really precipitated, yeah. But when it comes to this specifically, because we're still kind of like in that 9/11 sort of mentality of like, oh, we have to go into the Middle East and we have to deal with terrorism. It's just like it's a little we've been given the green light to dehumanize Arabs, right? We've been given the green light to view whatever military action is taken. I mean, again, we killed like 1 million people in Iraq, right? Like nothing, okay? So like we've already normalized all this endless war in the Middle East, and the the Muslim world being like terrorist religion, right? Like that's what we've made peace with, or at least white America has. So the normalization of the Gaza genocide that's breaking out right now is going to have very real like ramifications in terms of race relations, because we have plenty of Muslim American, Arab Americans in our own country, right? And they're going to slowly start being more alienated and start more dehumanized. You got places like Michigan, Dearborn, that Republicans certainly try to frame them as like, oh, Dearborn is like a terrorist headquarters, right? Or some stupid bullshit. But I certainly see now, with the dismissive attitude that Democrats have had in this election for those constituencies, again, the way that they sort of just ignored the Palestinian delegates at the DNC convention. And you can see like a lot of liberals also like having hostile attitudes towards Muslims, and like their outspoken attitudes against the Palestinian genocide. Like it's just going to become more normalized to cast aside and dehumanize Muslims in this country. Again, that's just my personal observation. Yeah, man. Again, like the thing about it is that and as I've said before, Gaza is the blueprint. So the militarization that's happening in Gaza, the occupation, and again, it's the Israeli police or the Israeli IDF forces who train our police, who create this militant attitude. I mean, they're learning those techniques, especially in urban combat zones, and then now they're building up cop cities as training grounds. It's all interconnected. So this sort of like this manufactured consent towards the genocide that's happening in Gaza is going to be the same way when our decline really sort of just goes off the rails, right? And then you start seeing the same occupations and the same militarization and divisions that are happening. Segregation. They're going to bring back segregation. Like they will. Like it's going to happen. And plenty of white people in this country who pretended to be liberals, or at least somehow progressive minded, they're going to be they can recognize that their whiteness is going to protect them. I mean, eventually the whole like race and class structures aren't going to be as permanent, because again, there's plenty of white people who do face I guess you could say oppression from the police state. But yeah, I mean, those with money, and especially with whiteness, they're going to be like first class, like protected. So yeah, man, I mean, as I said, Gaza is the blueprint, and plenty of white people in this country, they don't recognize it immediately, but like it's the same dynamic. They look at Israelis as one of them, because these are white people in the settler colonial system of racial apartheid and militarization. And so when that comes here for America, because again, this is a settler colonial country, first and foremost, no matter what anybody tries to argue, the militarization that's going to continue with the police state is going to inevitably create racial apartheid. And again, like, this is just what people are going to start rationalizing. And then when we start bombing our own neighborhoods, it's going to be like, oh no, because see, there's terrorists and extremists and they're using their people as human shields. It's going to be the same thing. I kind of, again, I'm going off the cuff, so maybe, I guess it's because of this, I don't know if I'm sick or anything, but, I guess I'm not being as clear as I want to be. But again, the October 7th Al-Aqsa flood operation is truly, and I want to be careful with the words that I use, it's truly a moment in history that has to be reflected on. And again, too many people want to treat it as so like this is just some barbaric response, some barbaric act of violence and just murder and pillage. And like, we have to have a little more respect about what this situation is, this historical moment is, what it entails, the consequences down the line. Because, this October 7th that's happened, again, you look at all different kinds of moments in colonial history, and there's October 7th everywhere, okay? You look at slave rebellions, you look at native rebellions, like, you have the people who have been colonized and dispossessed or pushed aside, all the good land is taken by these colonial outsiders, and then you're pushed off into the periphery. And then not only that, like, you're deliberately starved and worked to death, and then your populations are decimated by disease, and then you start losing your language and your customs and your religion. It's like, eventually any group, and this is what history has shown, any group would fight back and resort to extreme violence because they've experienced extreme violence. And it's just so frustrating to see. I haven't seen too many posts, but there have been a couple where it's just all the commemoration of the tragic lives that have been lost and the year of trauma. Like, there was like one op-ed about like Israel. Oh, a year of trauma for Israel. And I'm just like, are you fucking joking? Like, what the fuck, man? Okay. And like, to see what's happened to Gaza, and of course we're still stuck on the 40,000 death toll, but like the estimates that are coming out, particularly from prestigious academic medical journals, are putting it in the hundreds of thousands, okay? Some as high as 300,000. Like, it's insane what's happening. And it's just like, in this, again, like the normalization of just the wholesale slaughter of people of color, especially within our media, is a horrific sign of what is to come in this country when people of color are going to be eventually separated, right, and occupied. Because again, like, as this system continues to decline, it's going to revert back to, the base model, right? Because this is what America is about. America is a colonial state for white people. That's what it was made for. And like, there's actually been just recently, very recently, a Republican senator who was like slightly just starting to say like, well, Loving v. Virginia, that should be left up to the states, right? Or, Plessy v. Ferguson, or Brown versus Board of Education. No, Plessy v. Ferguson is like separate but equal, but that's what they're going to want to bring back. And Brown versus Board of Education, like they're going to start saying that. They're going to be like, oh, it should be left up to the states. It's just like, this is what's going to continue to get worse and worse. And of course, Democrats they'll say about it, they'll talk about how terrible it is. Oh, we should prevent this. But again, they didn't codify Roe v. Wade. They're not going to codify Obergefell. So what makes you think that these other laws are going to codify? It's just like, it's just unbelievable. And anyway, so as I was saying, with October 7th as a moment in anti-colonial action concerning other events in history that have had similar, episodes of violence, it's just like, this is just inevitable. You look at the history of Israel, and even before that, you look at the end of World War I and the British occupation, and even before that too, there was like speculators and Zionists, people buying up land under the Ottoman Empire. Like this, so this has been like a concerted effort for some time, since like the late 19th century. You have these Zionists who have, they organized, they created their groups in Britain. They tried to appeal to the British Empire. And then eventually, after the end of World War One, that's when they start implementing plans. Of course, there's the Balfour Declaration. They start implementing their plans to resettle, Zionists in the region. And then, of course, these Zionist settlers resort to terrorism. Some of the first car bombings were conducted by Zionist terrorists. And then the end of World War II comes, or, actually during World War II, there were certain extremist gangs who wanted to appeal and coordinate with the Germans. It's just like, it's crazy to think about it, but these things happen. So like, when we make comparisons about Israel and Nazism, it's not some like far-fetched thing. There's like real historical connections. And then, of course, the end of World War II, United Nations, they make their votes. Britain pulls out. All the while, they were training militias and arming them. So like, again, like Israel has always been clear, and you can look at the writings of these, founders. I was trying to read, a little bit about Theodor Herzl, and then Jakobinsky. I hope I'm saying that right. And like, there's like sort of like even then there was a division between like revisionist Zionism and labor Zionism. So, there was more atheistic, socialistic Zionist attitudes versus the hardline, conservative, religious Zionism. It's just like, it is very interesting to see like how this movement was formed throughout history, how it was facilitated, how extensively these founders wrote that this was a colonial project, that plenty of these founders understood that they were conducting a violent action and that the native population, the Palestinian, would resist. They knew that. And they were counting on it too, because they were saying like, yeah, I mean, we want them to resist. We want them to constantly be in conflict, because then we could, get support from the Western allies, the Western imperialists, to like to further their interests in the region. Like, that's what they wanted. They knew exactly what they were doing, that they were facilitating and perpetuating Western imperial interests. Yeah, man. And then, of course, you see the actual like war in 1948, after being trained by the British, military advisors and being armed. And there's like some reports that I've read, or articles I've read, where a lot of the weapons that they were given were surplus, like German, armaments from the war, because of course they couldn't be armed by allies. That would be too, obvious. So they gave them the weapons that were surrendered from World War II. Weapons that were most definitely used to murder Jews in the Eastern, in Eastern Europe, Ukraine, the Soviet Union. Like, it's crazy, man. And again, you talk about what's happening now, and of course people act like, oh, well, you see, what was Israel supposed to do? These terrorists, they give them no option. But it's like, look what happened in 1948. All these like villages were massacred. There's still like mass graves that they like quietly report on. They don't really say anything, but they still discover mass graves of Palestinians in Israel. It's ridiculous. It's just like how. But again, because when you live in a country like the United States that is founded on similar acts of violence, colonial violence, and ethnic cleansing, like, you just have to rationalize it, because, of course, if you were to say that that's terrible, then you would have to reflect on your own country, and then you would realize, this country is also an illegitimate colonial settler state founded on genocide and slavery and segregation. So, like, like that's like a lot of people have said, like, oh, so I guess the U.S. is also illegitimate. Like, yes, it is. It's just, yeah. So, again, I'm sort of just riffing in this opening part. But yeah, as we discuss the reflections of the last year, there's certainly the dystopian, attitudes and response that are happening, just completely inhuman and evil. I don't want to be too depressing. Of course, that's something that I have been dealing with, but, there have also been things that have been hopeful, watching how the world has responded, because, as terrible and violent, I'm not denying the violence. I'm not denying the violence that occurred, because I mean, like, of course it was violent. That's the whole point of the operation. It's a military, guerrilla military operation. But as violent as it was, it had to happen for people to talk about it, because, again, only very few people have been following Gaza as a humanitarian crisis. And of course, it's not exactly something that you can discuss, or at least before October 7th, something you could discuss in open circles, public circles, because not that many people know about it. And honestly, like, it's like there's so much that you have to explain. And then also because it includes Israel, of course, the reflexive response is just like, well, Israel's Jewish and I don't want to be anti-Semitic. So that's why most people didn't really have it in their consciousness. But now it's really stepping in, because people have that programming of Israel being a Jewish state, we have to support it, and then they see all the horror that's unfolding, and they're just like, okay, I know I'm not anti-Semitic, and I know again, a lot of people support Israel as a country, but they're like, but this is too much. Like, it's just like the basic human response of just like genocide is just not okay, it's not acceptable no matter what, and it's certainly been inspiring to watch. Plenty of people that I've known personally, acquaintances who are just not political in the slightest, but yeah, I mean, they'll post like different humanitarian, links and try to, make a voice for it. And of course, people were posting, I mean, it was the AI image, right? All eyes on Rafah, which is still kind of corny, but, at least they're saying something about it, that counts for something. But yeah, it's certainly been inspiring to see all the global protests that have been happening, particularly student protests. It's been shocking to watch the police repression of that. But again, like, this is just what's going to end up happening. All pretenses of liberalism and progressive attitudes, especially within our institutions, they're just going to throw it away, because now it's about imperial control. Again, like, it's imperialism and capitalism over everything, even for liberals, okay? And they're going to throw that away. They're going to pretend as though they're staying consistent with their values, but again, like, liberalism is just inherently hypocritical. So yeah, yeah, man, it's, I can't compel myself to advocate for, this new administration. Again, I didn't vote for Biden, and it's interesting because my abstention from the 2020 election didn't really have Palestine as a consideration. It was mainly like healthcare and like domestic platforms. Like, that was the main concern that I had about Biden, that he wasn't. They kept talking about pushing him left. Oh, we just got to vote for him in and he'll make it easier to pass Medicare for all or raise wages. And so that was my main issue with Biden and my refusal to vote for him. So it's interesting now to see, how that has paid off. I mean, I shouldn't say paid off, but it's just like, it's self-indicating, right? Where it's just like, I didn't vote for this dude, so all this horrible shit that's happening is not on my conscience, because I already knew that he was a fraud. I didn't have to go through that disappointment that a lot of people are experiencing about him. But yeah, so it's interesting. So that was like the main issue for me not voting for Biden, was more of a domestic platform. And then now my refusal for Kamala Harris is strictly foreign policy. Because, I mean, like, I already knew, I mean, it's pretty obvious that she's not going to pass anything domestically. But this sort of escalation foreign policy wise, it's just it's just mind boggling to see just the clear programming of it. Like, there's just like zero hesitation about it, right? She says, oh, there's no change in plans, right? And she's like almost defiant. Like, how dare would you ask me that question? Like, that's like the way that she is about it. It's just unbelievable. Just like the lockstep. Because again, liberals, like the Democratic Party and Republicans, they differ domestically, or at least they pretend to differ domestically. The liberals are more socially progressive, but financially and like economically, they're pretty much on the same page. But then also, yeah, foreign policy wise, they're for the maintaining of the maintenance of empire. Like that's all that concerns them. I guess it's just like different targets. So, you know, uh, Republicans are anti, Ukraine at the moment for whatever reason. I guess is mainly because like they kind of like Putin in Russia, so like that's why they don't want to support Ukraine. Um, and again, and with Israel, like some of them are starting to like voice like it is interesting. Like there are plenty of Republicans that are voicing like criticisms of Israel, but it's very clearly anti-Semitic. So it's just so funny to be like, how am I sitting on the same side as these people? But it's for completely different reasons. But anyway, so yeah, but like that's what Democrats want. They want to continue with Ukraine and Israel. Like Republicans, they want to focus on China and Mexico. Like that's or Iran. Like Iran, like they'll happily bomb Iran. But it's just like, I mean, it's just so crazy to see things unfold. It's just so crazy, man. And like, of course, this militaristic attitudes are just going to be, through the roof, and you can't criticize the military. You're gonna watch like the Super Bowl, right, or like some other football event, and it's just gonna be jets and troopers and color guards and big flags. All the those mega field flags that like there's like 200 cops like folding it and flapping it, whatever. It's just so, God, it's gonna be so fucking stupid. Oh my God. I mean, like, what are we doing, man? It's like we're trying to start World War III. I'm just like, it's so crazy. Again, and still, like, healthcare, living wages, that's just an afterthought, not even a thing. Functioning infrastructure, right? It's like we're going to try to start World War III and our country's literally falling apart. And it's just like, I don't get it. It's just like it's suicide. But it's like either empire or like the world burns. Like we have to stay in charge. Anyway, it's just unbelievable. Now, of course, the war is expanding now. Israel's expanding the war into Lebanon. They're conducting limited operations, ground operations in the southern Lebanon region, which like they're experiencing heavy casualties. There's been some people saying that there's like 300 fatalities already. I don't believe that. That would be horrible. But it's hard. That is for certain. And I mean, yeah, it's just like, what are they doing? Like, what is the plan? They couldn't do it in 2006. These Lebanese, Hezbollah fighters, they have been training for this for their whole lives, basically. Like, this is the one thing that they've trained for. Whereas the Israeli military has been, getting soft, with their border guards in Gaza, and then just like random like patrols in the West Bank harassing, kids playing soccer, like, or like supporting some like inbred settler trying to like burn an olive grove. It's just like, dude, like this is so fucking. I mean, again, like Israel doesn't even have a military. It's just like a glorified air force. That's really all it is. Like their ground troops. They're so fucking. They're sloppy. They're just like thugs. So like. They can't fight. They're all reservists. I'm not doubting that they have like special operators, right? But it's like you can't win wars, especially these like very extensive ground wars. Like Israel has this delusion, right, of greater Israel, that they're going to go from the Nile River to the Euphrates. Like that's the greater Israel dream. And it's like you guys can't even fucking penetrate southern Lebanon. Like if you guys even attempted to fully mobilize, because again, it's like they want to tip their toes into invading Lebanon. It's like you can't do it. It's either all or nothing. And of course, if they went full on, ground war, ground invasion for Lebanon, that would cause Iran to like really, dedicate their missile strikes. I mean, yeah, they're getting strike from everywhere. They're getting strike from Yemen and Iraq, the militias there. It's just unbelievable. Like what? Like it's again, this is like a suicide, like death cult, and it doesn't really matter to them how many people die. Arabs and Muslims die. They're just gonna, light the whole region on fire. And of course, they got nukes. And of course, it doesn't seem like there's any stopping Israel. And it doesn't seem like the United States is gonna like, rein them in. Like again, again, this it may appear that I've like tried to like frame the Zionists as so like, controlling, like puppeteering foreign policy, but that's not the case. Everything that's been happening has been American approval, American like again, everything that's happening, this is what America wants. This is what Biden wants specifically. And then, of course, Kamala Harris, she's not going to really change course on it. It's just like we're in a really dark place. We're in a very dark place. These people in power, they're very evil. Unbelievable. This is why I can't vote for them. This is why I can't vote for Kamala Harris, because she's not going to stop this. She's not going to turn back or like try to slow down shipments. Unbelievable. You know, like, I didn't watch the vice presidential debate, but of course there's that clip where Tim Walz was saying, we support the expansion of Israel. I don't know if he misspoke on that, but it's just like, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. And then meanwhile, you got articles in Israeli media trying to like delegitimize Lebanon and trying to say like, well, this is the ancient land of Samaria, or like whatever stupid shit that they say. Because it's just like, I don't, it's so crazy. Whenever Israel like comes up, it's like everybody's suddenly an ancient history expert. Like, Israel's like the only country that existed in the Bronze Age. Like, it's just fucking unreal. Any other group, right? If the Assyrians still exist as a culture, you know, an ethnic group in Iraq. If the Assyrians say we're going to bring back the Assyrian Empire, obviously that would be insane. If Sisi in Egypt, the president, declared himself pharaoh, obviously that would be crazy. That would be insane. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? But Israel, oh no, I mean, you know, we gotta respect their beliefs and we gotta respect their religion, because it's just crazy, man. You know, the way that Netanyahu has been speaking about these areas. You know, he's talking about the West Bank. He doesn't refer to it as the West Bank. He says Judea and Samaria. That's just like, you know, that's the consent that they're building to reestablish this delusional, you know, kingdom of Israel, right? And rebuilding the third temple. It's just, what the fuck are we doing? We're literally supporting religious fanatics. And again, you know, kind of tracks with U.S. foreign policy, because, you know, we've had connections with Al-Qaeda and ISIS and other Islamic extremist groups, and now we're doing the same with Israel. We're openly supporting groups that were previously established, you know, and designated as terrorist groups, right? The Jewish Defense League and these, I guess, the Kahanists is another name for them. You know, they were very clearly marked as terrorist groups in Israel as well. So Israel and the United States declared these groups as terrorists, and now you have people like Ben Gvir, Smotrich, you know, in positions of governance, you know, pretty powerful ministers, and they're saying the most insane things, blood and soil, you know, just completely psychotic propaganda coming out, where it's like, I mean, again, like Smotrich, he pretty much said like, the war is not going to end against Iran until Iran is overthrown. And, you know, Hezbollah and Hamas are destroyed, and we're going to resettle Gaza. We're going to take southern Lebanon, or, you know, just take Lebanon as a whole. That's what some people are saying. Unbelievable. It's just crazy. Like, what the fuck are we doing? And it's a pipe dream. It's not going to happen. They're not going to take the Middle East. It's a fucking delusion. The United States couldn't take the Middle East. It's like, we're not going to stay in this region forever. We got our own problems. Our country's falling apart. We're going to start a world war in this region. It's just like, it's fucking crazy, dude. We can't do it. Like, our government, our Air Force, we can bomb the shit out of people for sure, but actually like occupying the area, and, you know, the whole point of going to these wars over the region, taking the land, is to extract resources. And of course, you know, we're not gonna you know, transport Americans overseas to do that. We need the native population to help with that extraction. So it's just like, what are we doing? Because, like, people hate us. Like, these governments maybe are, you know, willing to work with us. You know, Saudi Arabia, right? Jordan. These are, you know, collaborator governments for sure. Egypt. But like the general public, like, if the true war breaks out, they're gonna, you know, they're gonna uprise. I mean, this is gonna be like, you think the Arab Spring was something? Like, oh my God, like, what are we doing? And there's just no stopping it. And like, it's just like, yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen. And again, you know, we're talking now about the potential response from the Iranian strikes that happened on the October 1st, and there's very real talks about Israel targeting civilian infrastructure and oil facilities, nuclear facilities. And Iran has pretty much said, if that were to happen, that we're going to bomb the whole region, all the oil infrastructure in the region. which is going to, create a global, collapse, apocalypse, basically. Like, what, like, unbelievable, man. Unbelievable. Like, what are we doing? Like, Biden is just like, I mean, again, he's clearly not the one making decisions here. He's just the one saying, oh yeah, do it, yeah, what, yeah, do it. Like, cause, I'm working now with elderly people. I got a, food service position at this elder care facility, and I like it. I really do. And talking with these people, these older folks, and I talk a lot of shit about boomers, but I'm of course very kind and polite with elders. I have deep respect for elders. So these guys are, they're very sweet, especially, because I didn't really grow up with my grandparents. So it's just nice to like have that, just, taking care of people. But yeah, it's just like, some of these guys, like they're in their 80s, and again, I love them. They're great people, but it's just like to imagine them making decisions to like bomb Iran. It's just like, I would never vote for these people. Okay. Cause like there'll be moments like, cause like the way it works is that the day before they'll mark their menus and what they want. So sometimes these folks, they'll mark their menu and they say they just want soup, but they haven't eaten too much throughout the day. So I'll have to go to them and I'll have to double check like, hey, did you want to eat anything else? And they're like, oh yeah, let me get a sandwich. And it's just like, so just imagining one of these, residents in the situation room. It's like these generals and chief of staff, like making decisions and like presenting him plans with like, well, here we can target their facilities, and here's, we're seeing some movement, and it's just like, oh yeah, do it, go ahead. It's just like, that's, oh my god, or at least it's Kamala Harris since she's the vice president. But what are we doing, man? It's just so bad. This is so bad. I'm just like, and again, the media is just like in another realm of reality. It's just so dystopian to see this, that they're like, of course, they've had to like play cover. Like, again, the presidential debate, like, they couldn't hide it anymore. They up until that debate, they were pretending that everything was fine, and then they couldn't hide it. Public opinion swinged because they saw this very clearly, like, sad old man who couldn't talk, and it's just like, oh my god, dude. Again, as I said, like, just imagining, like, again, like Biden is going to go down as much as the media is going to try to pretend that, oh, he was such a president, and he was steadfast firm, and he led us through difficult times, the COVID recovery, and there's economic growth. Of course, they talk about this recent like unemployment report, like, oh look, we've had a record employment in this quarter, and it's just like, okay. I mean, I recently got a job, but I'm still barely making part-time. I would like more hours. I would like better pay. Like, that's the problem. It's like, unemployment doesn't mean anything if these jobs can't afford a basic living. It's just like, what are we doing? So, yeah. So, Biden, of course, this old senile man is basically, asleep at the wheel. So he's very clearly not the one making the, minute-to-minute decisions. He's just like, he's just being presented with the plan and just saying, unbelievable. So again, like, what's happening here is not just Biden. It's the defense industry. It's oil and gas lobbies. It's, it's just all these different factors that are needing to preserve Israel, to preserve their economic and imperial interests. Again, a lot of it's also ideological because there's just some people who are straight up just Zionists. I mean, Biden is a staunch Zionist. So, yeah, but it's ultimately this ideology. And then there's the material imperialist interests at play. So, yeah, man. And it's just all pointing to war. They're willing to risk it all. They're willing to risk it for the biscuit. They're just like, fuck it. If we get, like, the thought of defeat is just like unimaginable. It's just like, you can't, it's like the thought of Israel having to end their genocide and actually, like, create an equal state for Palestinians and give them the right to return. We can't do that. No, we can't do it. We have to kill them all. Like, that's just like No, you don't understand. Like the kindergarten is a terrorist base. The hospital is a terrorist base. It's just all like unbelievable. I mean, again, like, what are we doing, man? Like, we're just sleepwalking towards disaster. And of course, like, you have these countries like Iran that people kept treating like it was just some joke. Again, everybody was saying, oh, nothing's going to happen. Oh, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. And then Iran did something. They actually, with a limited strike, about 200 missiles, they did it. They, of course, there were interceptions, but that's, the sort of the whole point is that, you create target saturation for these interceptions, but enough is going to get through to cause damage. And this was just a warning, okay? They did the warning in April, and they used drones and cruise missiles, or So they were a little more telegraphed about it, but they wanted to show that we can do this, and this is just our older stock that we got, not our newer hyper tech equipment that we have. And then they did it again, and still showed that it's effective, and they can do it for extended periods of time. Again, like, we're just playing with fire here, man. It's just unbelievable. And again, like, that's one thing that I've read about. So, I mean, I've been following plenty of other commentators online, especially, military analysts. So, I've been following Greg Stoker and Colonial Outcasts, YouTube channel. And they're just going over their military analysis of the operation. And one of the things that one of them said was that you can tell that Israel is actually shaken by this, because they're just posting like some like anxiety, anxious teenage girl. Like, this isn't normal. Like, that's like what the official state Twitter page. Oh, this isn't normal. We're being bombed. Like, just like, oh, this is just happening randomly. Like, we're just peaceful, minding our business, and then Iran is just bombing us. Like, what the fuck? So, yeah, man. So, I mean, like, they were definitely shaken by that. And, of course, they're going to hide the damage that was caused at these air bases. Which, again, like, that kind of shows that the Iranian military is more moral and more effective than the Israeli military. So, either, what's happening in Gaza, like, it can't all be a mistake. Like, at this rate, if the Iranian military can precisely hit military targets, and the only casualty was from, like, a Palestinian man in Jericho in the occupied West Bank, who died from the debris of an interception that was made over Jordan. And I mean, like, it is sad that it happened. I'm not trying to like downplay it, but like the actual like security footage of it, it's just like, it's sort of like a Looney Tunes death. Not to downplay it, because again, it sucks that it happened. But like, he's literally just like standing on the street corner, and his whole fuselage just like lands right on top of him. And it's just like, I didn't want to laugh, but I'm just like, of all the things that could happen, you're just minding your business, and you're just like, again, like, that's kind of the way I would be. I mean, again, I don't live under constant missile barrages, but like, after a certain point, I would just probably get used to it and just be like, fuck it. If it happens, it happens. But then it actually happens. You're just smoking on the corner, and then a rocket debris falls on you. It's sad. But anyway, but that's like the thing that they're talking about. It's like, well, it was a Palestinian that died. Just one Palestinian. So it's clearly a failure. And it's just like, man, again, that's the only way that they can gauge, warfare, is how many people we can bomb and kill. Because that's how you win a war. It's like, you kill everybody, not, the actual like political outcome, right? As Clausewitz writes, wars are gauged. A war is a political tool. So, if you're going to go to war, at the end of it, there has to be a political outcome. So at the end of this, whatever conflict comes out of it, between Israel and the region, or, between Israel and Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran, like whatever political outcome comes, it's not going to be to Israel's benefit. Israel is isolated. Their economy is in decline. They're, pretty much just America's puppet, their attack dog. Because otherwise it would collapse overnight if the U.S. just withheld support. The political outcome for Hezbollah and Iran It's going to be that they're going to be stronger than ever before. They're going to be legitimized in the eyes of the Muslim and even Arab world, really, because they're the ones fighting American imperialism in the region. It's just like, it's sort of a no-brainer. I mean, again, like, this is why October 7th is so important, because this is the beginning of the end of American empire, and it's going to be bloody. It's I hope it doesn't escalate, because it's just like, we're going to kill all these people and we're still going to lose. Like, that's pretty much what's going to be. Like, that's just all our Air Force can do, is just bomb people, nuke them. But like, that's not how you win a war, man. Like, we're just going to decimate these populations, but we're not going to like dedicate, like, again, like, do you have any idea, like, the sort of maintenance and like the militarization that would be required to like occupy Iran? Like, it would have to be like a multinational effort. And even then, all the Western countries, like, we went through Iraq and that was a shit show. Like, Iran is so much worse. And just to occupy Lebanon, I mean, they attempted it in the 80s and that went horribly. This is just like, dude, like, it's psychotic and insane, and it's such a blunder. And this is the thing that's interesting about like these institutions, because if somebody was actually practical, they would tell them like, hey, like, we can't do this, okay? Like, this is not going to end up well. But they don't want to hear that. There's going to be constant yes men saying, we got to do it, we got to go, we got to hit them, and that's who's going to get elevated. So again, it's not meritocratic. It's all nepotism, right? And connections, and like, you just have to like be unquestioning. So anyway, I've spoken at length, talking just like off the cuff, so that's why I might seem a little unorganized. But I did want to highlight certain articles just to highlight on different events that have occurred, because of course we have a serious escalation, and the main reason for the Lebanon invasions that are happening, and subsequently the Iran response, which was the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. And again, Hassan Nasrallah, he really has come to my attention really since like October 7th. I didn't even know about him really before that, but he has really stood out to me as, and of course I want to be careful with what I say, but he has stood out to me as one of those like anti-colonial figures that are he's going to sit up there with like the true like resistance leaders, that can come to my head, say like Toussaint Louverture, Dessalines, right? Ho Chi Minh. Yeah, man, like he's up there. Like, he's gonna be one of the leaders that for future resistance factions and resistance anti-colonial movements, they're gonna look towards. And if you actually listen to the way he speaks and the way that he spoke about in past interviews, like, he even understood his position as an anti-colonial figure, and he understood that his fight was against American empire. And he spoke at length about how it's not the Zionists who own America, it's America that owns Israel, and so everything that's happening is to push American imperialism. He understood that, and he also spoke at length about how Israel needs to become a one-state democratic state that allows for a multi-ethnic, democracy, multi-religious democracy. Just like Lebanon is. Like, it's so funny talking about Israel being like the only democracy in the Middle East, and it's like Lebanon's right there. Like, Lebanon it's not perfect. It's of course incredibly corrupt country. I mean, the government doesn't really exist anymore at this point. But yeah, I mean, like, it's built off those principles as well as like a multi-ethnic, multi-religious democratic system, parliamentary system. So yeah, I mean, like, it's just crazy to see Israel. And again, like, Israel has attempted many invasions of Lebanon, and it has not worked out well. Lebanon is quite literally Israel's Vietnam. It's just, imagine, like, yeah, but it's like right on their border. So like, imagine if Vietnam could like launch missiles and like terrorist attacks in our own country. Like, that's sort of crazy to think about, but it never works out. And of course, they want to do limited targeted raids in Lebanon, which aren't going to accomplish anything. They're already experiencing heavy casualties. Like, you have to go in, you have to mass mobilize your troops and occupy that land which is going to be a meat grinder, and they're already sort of caught up in Gaza. It's just like, what are we doing here? But yeah, I mean, the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah is a serious escalation, and again, it's just crazy to think about, like, because you see these targeted raids that are happening and continuing in Beirut, and they always say like, oh, we try to send messages and evacuation orders beforehand, but with this, it was just like they just like surprised and just bombed the shit out of this whole city block basically, and they bombed it with like over 80 bunker busters, okay, 1 ton each. So that's like, it's just, I mean, I'm not gonna do the math, but it's just like basically like they just dropped a mini nuke, okay, like with the amount of ordnance, a mini nuke in this territory, and this city block, killing, I mean, some estimates are like 500 civilians, just completely like vaporized that whole city block. And like, again, this is the surgical, humane military. Oh, it's just so crazy to think about when they talk about this is a surgical precise attack that happened, and it's just like, like you keep using that word surgical and precise, and like the whole point of a bomb is the very opposite of being surgical. It's just so stupid. Again, a 1 ton bomb is the very opposite of a surgical strike. Unbelievable. Again, if these people, were minding their, and again, like, it's just so crazy the disconnect that people have about war. Because, again, we live in such a cushy, space, and so we don't have to think about it because nobody's bombing us yet. And just thinking about, like, oh, man, like, they're just using them as human shields. Like, that's just the basic thing. Meanwhile, Hezbollah is, like, a parliamentary, like, political party. So you're calling them terrorists, but it's like, what foreign attacks has Hezbollah made outside of like Israel? Like, has like Hezbollah bombed America? Has Hezbollah bombed the UK or France? Like, no. Like, so how exactly are they terrorists if they're fighting Israel? I mean, basically, Hezbollah exists because of the Israeli occupation in the 80s. Like, they're a resistance group. That's what they are. Unbelievable, man. And I was seeing a video about like this family, like they're with their children, and they were just like recording a fun little video, maybe just trying to like keep their kids distracted, these little girls distracted, because like they had already been bombing for like a couple days before. But this was just like, you see this girl playing, and then suddenly all these explosions in the back, and you look out the balcony, and like it's like at least several miles away, but they're at least high enough where like you have a clear view of the bombing, and like you can tell that these were loud explosions because even on like the video, like you could hear like the sound clipping. So like it's just unbelievable. Like, just I can't even imagine like the sort of like the seismic disturbances that happen, and like the air shock that you get to feel by watching like entire neighborhoods like miles away getting bombed. It's unbelievable, man. It's just crazy. And like that's the thing too, like this family and their children, they were just lucky enough that they lived a couple miles away, but like there were families just like that at the bombing site, like people just like with their children, and they just so happened to live right next to the Hezbollah headquarters. But of course, the human shield, so we have to bomb them. We have to massacre all these people. It's just unbelievable, man. And the U.S. is just like, go ahead, yep, green light. But hey, if Russia did this in Ukraine, like, of course, oh my God, this is a terrible tragedy. This is horrible. This is savagery, And again, and I almost forgot to mention, because again, like there's so many things to keep up. There was the pager attacks that happened, the little gadgets that were, smuggled in with explosives, and apparently they've been doing that for like years. So like they just like they just like smuggled in these devices into the Hamas or the Hezbollah supply chain, their communication lines, or at least that's what in theory what it was supposed to do. But a lot of them were civilians that just had them, or they're like civilian employees of Hezbollah, which clearly that makes them a terrorist, right? Like this, like I don't know, man, it's so crazy. But yeah, it's just like the things that we're beginning to normalize, and like the way that it's spoken about in the media, and just like other like, just like other comments online, which I really try to like not pay attention towards, but it's just crazy to see like the things that people are saying, especially this like Reddit attitudes, like, oh, based in, oh yeah, just, oh, this is so based, this is COINTELPRO, oh, blah, blah, like whatever the fuck, I don't fucking, it's just so stupid the way people treat this war. And again, it's just like, I mean, hey, I'm a shit poster, out of shape shit poster, but at least, I don't want this war to continue. I want there to be peace. There's just so many people that are just treating it like they want to live vicariously through this war, but of course they're fucking pussies. They'll never shoot a gun or fight, for any cause. And it's just like, so they have to live vicariously through these, Mossad, like IDF, like, Hasbara users online that are just like, this is a great day. This is an effective operation. And then, there's a story of like this 8-year-old girl like picking up a pager, trying to like give it to her dad. And then of course it explodes and she fucking dies. It's just so ridiculous, man. But of course, again, if Russia did that to Ukraine, if Russia smuggled in explosive devices into like civilian electronic, equipment, and then they just like exploded and killed like thousands or hundreds of people, obviously that would be a terrorist attack, straight to the Hague, like no questions asked. It's just like, I'm just, yeah, it's just crazy, dude, crazy. And of course, what's happening now in Lebanon, I mean, we just normalized the complete, razing and pillaging of Gaza, and now we're going to move on to Lebanon. And again, like, they're going to try to invade southern Lebanon, but they're going to keep getting ground up, and they're going to keep getting, equipment, paralyzed, and disabled equipment, tanks, heavy casualties. Again, they're talking about like 300 dead. I don't believe that, but it's going to add up. It's going to certainly be, it's going to be on a greater scale than it was in Gaza. There was one report that I read where it's like, they're going to invade with 3 divisions. I'm just like, 3 divisions? Invade Lebanon with 3 divisions. Good luck with that. It's just crazy. Crazy. And again, I'm not like some military expert. I studied plenty about warfare. But like, it's just interesting to listen to actual veterans talking about like they're just like basically saying like, this is a death trap, and like Hezbollah has trained their entire lives, okay, for this moment, okay. I mean, since 2006, and Hezbollah was in a far weaker capacity, so it's just like, what, like, it's unbelievable. You see the way that the Israeli propagandists and like the ministers were talking about like, they're going to put the helicopter, they're going to put the rocket launcher in in your kitchen. This is you have a rocket vent. Like, it's just like, it's just crazy. Like they literally had like the cartoon like CGI of like, oh, every house and every garage, in every house and every garage there is a SAM missile site. Like, it's just so stupid. Oh my god, but that's just the pretext that they have so that they can just bomb entire neighborhoods and villages. Unbelievable, dude. Wow, man. Just so evil. And again, like, this is happening under a Democratic administration. Like, who, like, again, you go back to, Bush era, like 2003 or 2004, 2005, whichever year was like the major surge that happened, where things were truly escalating. Like, you go to them and you tell them, hey, in 20 years, Joe Biden is going to be president, and he's going to basically start World War III with Iran, and his successor is going to be a woman of color, a black woman of color, who is also going to, continue this war. Like, if you told people that, they would be like, are you crazy? Because, like, clearly, this is like the Republican platform to start a war with Iran. But now the Democrats have become Republicans. That's like what has happened. All, basically what's left of the Republican Party is like this MAGA, personality cult around Trump, and all of the, sort of like paleo-conservative or like neocons of like Bush era politics, Dick fucking Cheney, okay? Like, now they're appealing to the Democrats. It's just like, oh my god, we're in such an evil place, dude. Unbelievable. But yeah, okay. Now, I did want to speak on like this article because, I've been kind of going off the cuff, but I did want to speak on this article, and this is an opinion piece from Daniel L. Davis concerning from Newsweek, and he is writing here about the Nasrallah assassination and how this will not make Israel safe. So this is just something that I wanted to read on. Again, I've been talking off the cuff and a bit unorganized, but I did want to highlight on some articles and their analysis of the situation, the escalating war in Lebanon, and like how Israel's position is not safe, despite how much they want to saber rattle and puff up their chest, And then again, like that's all these assassinations and high profile bombings, like it's just a PR victory. Because like Hassan Nasrallah, he knew what he was signing up for when he became the Secretary General. He knew that he was like, the whole point of it was that if I die in solidarity towards Gaza, and again, like that was the main thing, because they were making diplomatic dealings through intermediaries, and like the whole point that Nasrallah had was like, I'm not gonna, make a settlement until there is a ceasefire in Gaza, until the genocide stops. And it's the same thing with Iran, and the same thing with the Ansar Allah, the Houthi Yemen forces. Everybody's saying the same thing. We're not going to stop our operations until the genocide ends. And instead of having that, and because that's what Israel has to do, we just have to kill everybody in Gaza. They killed Hassan Nasrallah, and they've made him a martyr. And like his death has galvanized the region. I mean, he's like a Shia cleric, right? But there are plenty of Sunnis now in the region that are like paying respects to him, and it's just like again, like they still, after all these years of war on terror and the martyrdom of all these leaders and all the fighters, they still don't understand that like killing these people is not going to accomplish anything. It's just going to radicalize them and entrench them. Like, obviously, man, it's just, again, whatever. So let's just read this article here. Nasrallah assassination will only make Israel less safe. Again, opinion piece by Daniel L. Davis, a senior fellow from Defense Priorities. So here, many in the Middle East and America hailed the September 27th Israeli assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. Television stations in Israel had singing and dancing in their studios, and some reporters handed out chocolate on the streets. In time, they may come to regret these celebrations. Hassan Nasrallah was many things, but he was a cautious and pragmatic politician at heart. He used many inflammatory words and often fiery speeches over the years, but kept his actions restrained. He held back many of the most violent and reckless voices within Hezbollah, seeking to thread the needle of keeping up resistance against Israeli strength while avoiding anything that might invite an Israeli military response. The day after the October 7th terrorist attack by Hamas, Hezbollah fired a limited number of rockets and artillery shells against Israeli targets in solidarity with the Palestinian people, 300 of whom had been killed in the first 24 hours by the IDF in response to the terrorist attack. In the early days of the war against Hamas, there were concerns that Hezbollah might attack the IDF, putting the latter in a two-front war. Nasrallah restrained his troops, however, and no northern front was ever opened. In February, Nasrallah openly declared that if Israel put into effect a ceasefire in Gaza, he would stop the cross-border shelling from the north. In late July, Israel assassinated senior Hezbollah commander Fuad Shukr in Beirut. Hezbollah fired more than 300 Katyusha rockets into northern Israel in retaliation, but after the barrage, Nasrallah declared the action was limited and would not continue, and that he did not want a wider war. His pragmatism, resisting just enough to keep his followers happy while avoiding war with Israel, may ironically have cost him his life. In a recent interview with Christian Amanpour, Lebanese Foreign Minister Abdallah Habib claimed that in late September, Nasrallah had agreed to a ceasefire with Benjamin Netanyahu. The Lebanese government claims it had confirmation from the US and French governments that Netanyahu had agreed to the ceasefire, and then Nasrallah was assassinated anyway. Just days later, Israel invaded southern Lebanon. So again, I just want to take a moment here to pause. So again, like the way that they always try to frame these leaders, it's like, oh, there's some fanatical a barbaric group and they're unreasonable. You can't negotiate with them. But then look at this. He has very clearly tried to show restraint while also showing resistance and solidarity with Gaza and saying pretty openly, I will stop once you stop the Gaza genocide. Like, that's what he said. And, and I don't fault him for having such a restrained, response. Again, it's like an escalation ladder, right? It's an escalation ladder. So, it's like it's a tit for tat thing, and then we clearly plan out our response. It's like, this is what we're doing. It's for these reasons, and if you continue, we're going to escalate and target. Like, that's what he's done very clearly. But of course, our media doesn't properly present these positions and these platforms from these leaders because they always want to malign them. They're terrorists, so the already being a terrorist makes you illegitimate. So there's nothing to discuss. It's just anyway. But yeah, they also showed here that he was willing to make a ceasefire agreement, and then they still killed him because again, like, this is what Israel is. Like, Israel doesn't want peace. They killed him specifically to piss off Hezbollah and then further inflame these conflicts, further inflame the war, because they want to create a runaway situation that's out of control, and then the U.S. has to, send troops in, which, I mean, like, even that's not going to accomplish anything. So it's going to get all these people killed, but Israel's just out of its mind. It's just like, this is the end. Like, this is, this is going to be the most violent and undisciplined, right, unorganized phase of the decline. And then, of course, there's a very real chance that Israel's going to press the red button. Like, it's just fucking crazy. Unbelievable. So anyway, so I'll just continue here. Right, so many in Israel apparently believed that if they took out the head of Hezbollah, along with a stunning number of other high-ranking Hezbollah leaders, the organization would be weakened or possibly even fall apart, improving Israel's security. Those hopes are unlikely to be realized. To the contrary, based on my experience fighting insurgent foes in both Iraq and Afghanistan, the more likely result will be an increase in the threat to Israel. Consider that Hezbollah is reported to have upwards of 150,000 missiles and rockets in its inventories, hidden throughout Lebanon in bunkers, buildings, and tunnels. Nasrallah's pragmatism led him to engage in cross-border artillery and rocket skirmishes with Israel that were small enough to put pressure on Israel to agree to a ceasefire, but not so strong as to precipitate a powerful Israeli response. Thus, he refused to unleash any major attacks. But whoever officially replaces Nasrallah as the head of the group will be faced with this dilemma. Nasrallah didn't use his massive missile arsenal out of fear Israel would attack heavily, but Israel attacked heavily anyway, and now he's dead. The next leader will be under pressure to make much bigger use of Hezbollah's arsenal. Therefore, the threat to Israel is likely higher after Nasrallah's death, not lower. As Americans observed in both Iraq and Afghanistan, anytime you kill the leader of a militia or terror group, there is always someone else waiting in the wings. Such groups are expressly designed to survive the loss of a leader, even the top leader. Remember that Al-Qaeda didn't disintegrate after Osama bin Laden's death, and when the terrorist Abu al-Zawahiri was killed in Iraq in 2006, his terror group eventually became the much more powerful ISIS. Hezbollah is not going to be destroyed by the assassination of its leader, but now the group is likely to be more radical, more dangerous, and more lethal to Israel. For now, it is fighting for its life against the IDF in southern Lebanon, but if the IDF's invasion expands into a protracted war, Israel may find Hezbollah much less willing to engage in diplomacy than before Nasrallah was killed. The devil you don't know is sometimes worse than the ones you did. So that is the article here. So again, there's really no, like, that's the whole point. Like, that again, they never factor into the calculation that, like, these groups are designed to suffer heavy losses, especially within the command structure, but like the actual, like, operational abilities of the ground troops, that's not going to be affected. Again, like, it's designed to, like, have the more, like, independent, sort of squad level operations and tactics. Again, like, Nasrallah may be killed in Beirut, but, some, like, anti-tank crew or, like, artillery crew in the hills of southern Lebanon, they're still at their post. They still got their ammunition, and, like, their supply chains are, for the most part intact. And, like, again, like, it's like, Like you think about the tunnel networks in Gaza, and those are already pretty extensive. But then like you think about the tunnels in southern Lebanon that they have been maintaining for decades, and it's like an underground fortress basically, and like they can pretty much just, I bet you they're air conditioned, and like they got, you know, dude, it's just crazy to think about like all the capabilities that Hezbollah has. I mean, it's pretty much like the military of Lebanon at this point. Yeah, man, it's just crazy. Like they're not. I mean, these are hardened fighters. They're up against like reservists. These fucking guys who like they did a short stint. Some basic infantry training. They went on a maybe like a raid in the West Bank and just like kicked around this child, right? And now they're actually having to fight like a real. Because I mean, again, they're a militia, but they're like truly like they have conventional capabilities and like light arms, and like truly sophisticated anti-tank capabilities. It's just crazy, man. I mean, like shit, they don't even have to like invade Lebanon to get casualties. Like the Hezbollah is basically targeting their like staging grounds. Like that's just like, and again, like this, they want a limited operation, but the truth of the matter is that you have to push in. You have to mobilize your forces. You have to mobilize your population. You have to like push in truly. I mean, who knows what's going to end up happening, as escalations continue. But yeah, it's just like what was happening here. Like this is just like it's going to obviously be a disaster no matter what happens. Like Israel's basically like they want their cake and they want to eat it too. It's like they want to invade Lebanon, but they also don't want to like completely mobilize their society and have to deal with the fallout. Because yeah, there's going to be heavy casualties, and they've already been having casualties in Gaza. They're not built for this sort of long term grind. Like it's going to be a war of attrition, and like Israel, like people are going to get fed up with this because like they had the recent Iran strike, and like people were having panic attacks. So like they were just freaking out. Like a lot of these girls were just like having like temper tantrums, and you're just like, oh my god, like this is like they can't handle it. Like this is not. It's like you're not built like that, buddy. Not built like that. People in Gaza, people in Lebanon, they have known war for some time now, precisely because of Israel. So like, this is truly a war of. This is a war of survival. As much as Israel wants to frame it as like this is an existential conflict, they have options. It's like they still have options to like live in other areas in the world, as much as they want to like say Israel's the only safe place for Jewish people, which is like I think like recent events have demonstrated that that is not the case. That Israel is not a safe place for Jewish people. But yeah, it's just like there's just no other there's just no other way to frame it. That it's all about the religion. And eventually, the people in Israel who are going to stay behind, the real hardliners, they're going to be all these psychotic fanatics. But of course, you can't have a functioning state with that. You need doctors and engineers, and it's just like these people. I'm not saying that there aren't plenty of doctors and engineers who are also hardline Zionists, but it's like there's a certain level of depravity where like you just can't function as like a person, like anyway. So I just spoke at length about the assassination of Nasrallah and how it's going to eventually bite Israel. So I just spoke at length about the assassination of Nasrallah and how that will very likely bite Israel in the ass, because it's going to make them more hardline and less likely to negotiate. And I mean, like, why would they? I mean, you killed their guy, and you killed Hania, and then you also killed Nasrallah. And it's like, so why would anybody be interested in negotiating now? And it's so interesting too, because like they kill these leaders thinking that it's going to cause a collapse in like their command structure. And the truth of the matter is that if, and this is not like an endorsement or any incitement, I don't want to say anything, but if say Netanyahu and all his cabinet leaders, if suddenly, they were to die in some terrible airplane accident, okay? Again, not an incitement, just a freak accident. It's totally illegal. You can't say it. But if that were to happen, if the Ministry of Israeli government the command leaders, the high command structure, if they were to be suddenly, purged and suddenly deceased, like, Israel would collapse overnight. That's just the fact of the matter. Okay, if just Netanyahu alone, if Netanyahu suddenly, had a freak accident and he was no longer with us, Israel will go into just complete like collapse and chaos, political turmoil, possible civil war. Because like they're, as much as they want to pretend they're united, they're not. They're not united. But you see it with Hezbollah, right? Their whole basic high command has been wiped out. Even the so-called like acting like Secretary General, I don't think they've made an official like election yet, or maybe he's already succeeded. But like his cousin, it was Nasrallah's cousin. His name escapes me. Like they just like they took back command like nothing, and like again, it doesn't affect the ground troops that are actually in southern Lebanon who are actively fighting the Israeli invasion. Like this is like that's the thing, like because they know what they signed up for. They know that they are willing to give up their lives for this resistance, and they're united in that cause. And Israel has made them united. Okay, Israel is divided and insecure, and their economy is in free fall, and they're isolated on the world stage. They're internally divided, all sorts of political turmoil, and yeah, man, it's just a matter of time before things collapse and implode. But Hezbollah, Hamas, these groups are united, and they are in solidarity, and they know they have a clear vision, they have a clear path, and they're structured in a way that they can handle these sort of losses and casualties. And yeah, it's just like because they're fighting for their lives. Like that's really what it is. But anyway, so it's just crazy to think about. So I did want to read another article here. So I just read about the assassination of Nasrallah and the consequences of that. Then there's also the subsequent invasion that's occurring, where Israel wants to have a limited operation, but that of course is not going to pan out for them, and they're going to have to just slowly and steadily, dive deeper and deeper into this, because it's just like they can't pull out, because that would be like a political defeat for them. But at the same time, they have to keep, sending troops in, and that's just going to continue to grind them down. And then, of course, they're still stuck in Gaza. In fact, they already announced some other operations. And it's just like they're just expanding this conflict, but it's, going to keep getting worse for them. And it's just going to, it's going to grind them down. It's going to grind them down. So, right. So reading here from MSNBC. So here, this article written by Zishan Alim. Here they're writing about the invasion and the consequences of a regional war. So how Israel's invasion of Lebanon could spiral into a massive regional war. An expert explains why Israel's intensifying war on Hezbollah is risky for the region. So these are more regional consequences. So reading from MSNBC. Israel moved military forces into southern Lebanese territory Monday, an invasion that marks a major new level of intensity in about a year of conflict with Hezbollah. The paramilitary organization fired rockets at Israeli positions in the Sheba farms the day after October 7th, in solidarity with the Palestinian people after Hamas's attack on Israel. Hezbollah, sometimes called a state within a state, is backed by Iran and does not have wide support in Lebanon. Then Tuesday, Iran fired about 200 ballistic missiles at Israel, citing last week's assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut, and this summer the assassination of Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. The Biden administration has long opposed an Israeli incursion into Lebanon, but in the past year the administration has also been unwilling to take any meaningful steps to rein in Israel's behavior, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is acting boldly to assert more dominance in the region and degrade Israel's adversary, with a continued disregard for civilian lives. Israeli airstrikes have struck medical facilities and already killed hundreds of civilians in Lebanon. The probability of a regional war seems to be growing by the day. To better understand the unfolding conflict, I called Nick Blanford, a Beirut-based fellow at the Atlantic Council and the author of Warriors of God Inside Hezbollah's 30-Year Struggle Against Israel. Our conversation, edited for length and clarity, follows. So again, these are comments Again, this is an interview, so this is going to be a little structured, but we'll go here. So the first question that Zishan Alim asks here, what is happening right now, and how do we know when to say whether this is a new war? And then this is Blanford's response. I think you have to put the developments of the last few weeks into some context. One day after Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, Hezbollah staged a pro forma attack against Israeli positions along the Lebanon-Israel border, and it dedicated this attack to its allies Hamas and Gaza. But very quickly, it turned into a kind of tit-for-tat daily attacks. The Hezbollah guys would attack Israeli military positions along the border. The Israelis would retaliate with artillery fire, airstrikes into southern Lebanon, and this really continued from October almost uninterrupted. There was a clear moment in September when Israel's patience ran out, and they escalated in a very dramatic fashion by detonating thousands of pagers, which they've been able, apparently, to booby-trap. The following day, they detonated hundreds of walkie-talkies. That was followed up by intense airstrikes across areas of Lebanon where Hezbollah has a presence. And those attacks have intensified over the past 2 weeks, climaxing on September 27th with the massive airstrike on Hezbollah's underground headquarters in South Beirut, which killed the veteran Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, who has led the group for 32 years. The latest development is the advance of some elite Israeli army units into southern Lebanon, where they have reportedly taken some casualties. So I would say we are in a war, but it's not yet a full scale. Both sides are mainly hitting military targets, not infrastructure as well, although hundreds of civilians have been killed in Lebanon. I mean, I would argue that Israel is explicitly targeting civilian infrastructure. That's their whole strategy. But anyway, we'll see here. So again, so further question. So could you give us a brief primer on Hezbollah, how it emerged, what it is, what it believes, and its social function in Lebanon? So Blanford's response: Hezbollah is a Shia Muslim organization that follows the Iranian theocratic system of rule. Hezbollah has a secretary general, most recently the late Nasrallah, but the true leader of Hezbollah is the spiritual leader of Iran, currently Ali Khamenei. He's the ultimate authority, and in general, the Iranians will set the strategic agenda. Hezbollah emerged after the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982 to kick out the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which was deployed in strength in southern Lebanon. The Israelis in 1982 reached all the way to Beirut, and then they gradually withdrew. By 1985, they were occupying a border strip along the Lebanon-Israel border, and Hezbollah became the main resistance force against the Israeli occupation. Particularly during the 1990s, Hezbollah, which is backed by Iran but also supported by neighboring Syria, was able to deal blow after blow to the Israeli occupation forces, and that culminated in May 2000 with Israel pulling out of southern Lebanon. Hezbollah refused to put down its arms after the Israelis left. They said, "We need to keep our arms, our military force, to deter Israel from coming back into Lebanon." But there was also another unspoken response. There was also another unspoken reason, which is that Hezbollah gradually became a source of deterrence for Iran, especially after the war between Israel and Hezbollah in 2006, when it expanded very quickly and acquired a great deal of weaponry from Syria, Iran, and elsewhere. So for Iran, Hezbollah has now become a major force multiplier. Hezbollah has a slightly schizophrenic character because it is ideologically beholden to the Islamic leadership of Iran, but of course it is a Lebanese organization. It survives or falls depending on the support it gets from the Lebanese Shia community, which is why since the beginning, Hezbollah has invested a lot of social welfare organizations. The Shia population of Lebanon tends to be traditionally fairly downtrodden. They live in the poor areas of the country, traditionally neglected by the central governments, and Hezbollah really stepped in with schools and with hospitals, with repairing war-damaged houses, even things like helping farmers with agricultural aid. It's become an indispensable organization for the Lebanese Shia community, so they've been able to maintain the support since the early 1980s. Other communities, the Christians and Sunnis in particular, the Druze to an extent, say, well, hang on a moment, we do have a national army. Why do we need a Shia militia armed to the teeth, stronger than many armies around the world to defend Lebanon? So there have been growing calls for Hezbollah to disarm, and this is why Hezbollah has moved deeper into Lebanese politics, particularly over the last 19 years since the 2005 parliamentary elections. So that's at least observations about their role within Lebanese society and politics. Again, though, like, I don't get the impression, particularly with Nasrallah, that he's like hardlined and like, of course he's like a religious leader, but like I don't get the sense that he's like calling for, abuses towards Christians and other like minorities, religious minorities or ethnic minorities in Lebanon. So like I don't get that impression. I think Nasrallah was one of those figures who was really trying to legitimize Hezbollah as a political force and, trying to like bolster support. Because I mean, I believe even they have units in Hezbollah that are Christian and like other different religious groups. So like, they're primarily a Shia organization, but I don't get the impression that, I mean, again, I don't know. I'm not an expert on Hezbollah like this guy is, but you can see that they have invested in social welfare, civil welfare. Yeah, man. I mean, it's complicated. I mean, like they're a political organization. To just frame them as like a militia, a terrorist group, it's it's redundant. It's like it's reductive. It's just it's not a mature analysis of what this organization actually represents. And again, I'm not saying that they're no political group is going to be pure, right? And again, I'm a Marxist, so like the idea of like a religious, theocratic militant group, I'm not exactly in support of, but I have to recognize the context of what they were formed from. They were formed from the aggression from Israel. They're ultimately a resistance organization. That's, they wouldn't have existed if there wasn't constant foreign meddling in that area. And it's not just Israel. There was like, the occupation from the United States and, the United Nations and such. Again, there was like, people talking about, the bombing of... Like, it's just so crazy, like the way that the U.S. like politicians, especially Kamala Harris, had to like inject our own military into this conflict, right? Like, oh, well, you see, in 1980s, there was 200 Marines that were bombed. And it's like, well, they were an occupational force, so that's sort of what happens. Anyway, so, yeah. Anyway, so that's certainly the impression that I get, that Nasrallah, since 2006, has tried to more legitimize Hezbollah as a political organization. And again, like, as he might talk about here about like the different groups, Christians and such, but yeah, I would imagine more people on the ground, they have a more measured attitude towards him. And again, like there's things that I've read about Hezbollah's actions in Syria to protect minorities and like to counter ISIS. Again, like that's the thing. Is like every terrorist organization is ISIS, which is ironic because like ISIS hates Hezbollah, so it's just like it's so stupid. But anyway, so the next question: what are the fundamental dynamics driving how Hezbollah and Israel's government see each other, both in terms of geopolitical interests and domestic political interests? And then Blanford. Ideologically, Hezbollah and Iran want to see the end of Israel and a restitution of Palestine to the Palestinians. They have in the past assisted Palestinians during the Al-Aqsa Intifada. They would help the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza fight the Israelis. But in the past, they didn't get directly involved. When they kicked the Israelis out of Lebanon in 2000, Hezbollah didn't immediately rush across the border into Israel and say, we're going to go and liberate Jerusalem now. There is an acknowledgement that it's up to the Palestinians to liberate themselves, but Hezbollah is definitely there to help. When you look at it more realistically, the reason why Hezbollah is so powerful now is because the Iranians want them to be. We go back to this notion of Hezbollah forming a key role in Iran's deterrence architecture. The stronger Hezbollah becomes, the safer Iran feels. The Institute for National Security Studies, a leading think tank in Israel, has for the past few years described Hezbollah as Israel's greatest threat, which is quite remarkable in itself because we're not talking about a country, we're talking about an organization, albeit one that is backed by a powerful regional country. The Israelis have watched Hezbollah grow stronger and stronger. What the Israelis are doing now is something they haven't dared to do before, and that is to really go for broke with Hezbollah. What's interesting is I think the Israelis are gambling that Hezbollah and the Iranians do not want a full-scale war with Israel right now. Why? Because if there is a full-scale war, whatever the outcome, Hezbollah will take a huge battering, as indeed we're seeing now, and there's no guarantee that Hezbollah will be able to rebuild, rearm, and re-equip as quickly as it did after the 2006 war to continue serving as a deterrence for Iran. In other words, if Hezbollah gets engaged in a full-scale war now, Israel could lose its major deterrence factor in that war, and all this would be for the sake of coming to the support of Hamas in Gaza. Hamas is small fry compared to Hezbollah. Hezbollah is much, much more important to Iran than Hamas, which is why Hezbollah is still acting with a certain amount of restraint despite Israel's escalated actions against it. Hezbollah still has not used its arsenals of precision-guided missiles. It's a dangerous gamble. It could go wrong, especially now that Israeli troops are operating on the ground in southern Lebanon, Hezbollah's home turf. The current conflict could spill into a major war. We're still below that threshold moment, but if it happens, it has the potential to go regional, dragging in Iran, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. So I certainly, can understand his points about Hezbollah being careful, not trying to dedicate too deep into a regional war. But my argument would be that we're having these limited attacks and limited operations, but that's going to build up over time. And, and Israel doesn't have time. Israel needs to end Hezbollah as soon as possible because, they made these goals of returning the, settlers into the northern front. That's a goal that they outlined. They also outlined the goal of defeating Hamas and pacifying Gaza. So, the longer this drags on, and of course he's trying to frame it as Hezbollah being careful, really Hezbollah has time on their side. Hezbollah can sit there for as long as they need to. Because the whole point is that Israel has to come to us. It's you have to come to us and you have to take us out of these hills and you have to dislodge us. And that's going to keep dragging on, and Israel's economy is going to continue to decline, and more people are going to leave, and those casualties are going to start adding up in the military, and their equipment losses are going to start adding up, and they're going to need more and more support from the United States, and it's just again, this is the attrition that's happening, and guerrilla fighters are suited for that sort of asymmetrical attrition, warfare. That's what they're. Yeah, that's what they're built for. So so here, reading further, another question here. Okay, we're almost finishing here. So another question here. Can you walk us through the different scenarios you see unfolding here? Blanford. The least likely one is that a ceasefire comes in. The Americans and the French had an idea for a 21-day ceasefire to calm things down across the Israeli-Lebanon border. Netanyahu has rejected it, so that's not going to happen. A second scenario is that what we're seeing now continues. The Israelis haven't started hitting Lebanese infrastructure, power stations, bridges, roads, the airports, the seaports. They are focusing on Hezbollah military targets by using air power and now ground forces, albeit in a limited manner. Hezbollah, by the same token, is striking back at Israeli military forces. They haven't been hitting Israeli infrastructure. Now this could go on even at this heightened rate. But under current circumstances, I suspect that Hezbollah will continue doing what it's doing. In other words, absorb these blows that the Israelis have inflicted and keep firing rockets into Israel. In some respects, the Israeli ground maneuver could play right into Hezbollah's hands, as the Israelis are entering terrain that Hezbollah has had for 18 years. And Hezbollah has been able to prepare for exactly this eventuality. When the Israelis did move into Lebanon in 2006 after 2 weeks of aerial bombing, they came in for a big surprise. They didn't understand Hezbollah's underground bunker networks, its ambush positions, firing positions. You could have a similar scenario this time around, albeit on a larger scale, where the Israelis, who have a better understanding of what Hezbollah is about these days, could come in force for what they would describe perhaps as a limited incursion to basically rebelize and depopulate this broad strip of South Lebanon. But they risk losing a lot of troops because they're going to be operating in Hezbollah's environment. And at the end of it, if the mission is successful, what do you do then? Do you reoccupy South Lebanon? If so, you've gone back to the situation between 1978 and 2000, And that didn't end too well for the Israelis. But if you pull back to the border, then what is to stop Hezbollah basically moving back into the border district and beginning to rebuild? There could come a point when the Israelis say, we've hit all the targets from the air and our soldiers are fighting on the ground, but Hezbollah is still firing rockets across the border. And this is where perhaps a third scenario can kick in. The Israelis conclude that, well, we're going to have to escalate this even further by deploying a large number of troops into Lebanon to expand the target set to include Lebanese infrastructure as well. It could be at the point that Hezbollah, with Iranian blessing, feels it has no choice but to launch its precision-guided systems at Israeli military and infrastructure targets. This is where the conflict could go regional. So yeah, man, it's just like, this is not... It's like Israel is just like in a rock and a hard place. It's just like either they can do a limited operation, which is still going to drag on and is not going to accomplish anything. Like I said, it's going to be like Vietnam. They're going to like clear out these hills and these mountains and such, and they're going to pull back, and then Hezbollah's just going to set up shop. Like, it's just like, yeah. And then there's the other alternative where they truly mobilize and start a regional conflict, which, like, that's just going to, I mean, of course, they're going to bomb the shit out of Beirut and other areas in Lebanon, but Iran then is going to have to step in. And then, of course, you know, if Iran steps in, then the Israeli military is going to have to bomb them as well. And then, of course, Iran has no choice but to target all the American facilities and bases in the region. It's just like, it's just going to kick off. And it's just crazy how, like, this is all happening. I mean, Israel's a nuclear power, and there's been rumors that Iran has actually tested a nuclear weapon. Of course, you know, those are just rumors. But, yeah, man, it's just so crazy to think about, like, the power projecting that's happened now, and the sort of mad doctrine, right? The mutually assured destruction. Yeah, man, it's just crazy to watch everything. Right. I mean, shit. I mean, there's been really tense moments in the last few days that the Israeli response was going to break out. Nothing's really happened just yet. This is what I'll say, because if Israel could truly dominate their airspace and truly just wipe the floor with them, I think they would have done it already. But the fact that now Iran has such capable missile systems, it's just and that's the deterrence that they had to build. Again, the Iranian military, the Air Force, right? They have older generation American models. So of course, on a 1-to-1 dogfight, obviously Israeli Air Force is gonna, wash the floor. But that's not, the Air Force, that's not the aerial combat that's happening now. Now everything is, there's missiles and there's the ground defenses, SAM missile sites. Yeah, man, there's so many different capabilities now. That's the deterrence that Iran has made. Yeah, man, nobody's gonna win. That's the thing. It's just everybody's gonna burn. It's just crazy to think about, and there's a very real possibility of a nuke being deployed. So those are the stakes that are at play. So right, this is the last question here. All right, so what role does the U.S. have in all this, and what advice would you give to the Biden administration on how to prevent a full-scale regional war from breaking out? Blanford, yes, a regional war potentially could happen. If the Iranians assess that Hezbollah is about to get bludgeoned by Israel, they may conclude, we've got nothing left to lose. We're about to lose Hezbollah. Let's go large. We'll activate all our proxies across the region, and we'll give it a go and see what happens to Israel. I think the Biden administration is in a difficult position. President Biden is enormously frustrated with Netanyahu, partly because of the Gaza conflict going on for so long, but he has been urging Netanyahu since the get-go to not open a second front with Hezbollah. Now you could argue that a second front was open anyway because of these simmering tit-for-tat attacks that have been going on across the Lebanon-Israel border since October, but these attacks were containable. Hezbollah has said, look, this is a support front that we're doing. Once the war in Gaza ends, we're going to stop. So the emphasis has been very much on trying to conclude a ceasefire deal in Gaza, which will then have a trickle-down effect and should stabilize the Lebanon-Israel border. But of course, we haven't had a Gaza ceasefire. The conflict continues, and now the Israelis clearly have lost patience with Hezbollah and have gone large. There's very little that the Biden administration feels it can do, particularly when you've got a very close election coming up in just over a month now. So the Biden administration could do what it's done before and then suspend arms shipments to Israel, but this time do it properly. Cut off all military support to Israel. That would put a lot of pressure on Netanyahu to start picking up the phone and listening when Biden calls. But I don't think they're going to do that because there'll be political backlash in the United States, and that could affect Kamala Harris's chances against Donald Trump. I think Netanyahu's taking advantage of this and is going for it. So that's at least the end of this. Now, this last portion here about like the political blowback of denying support, I would argue the opposite. I would argue that more people are in support of stopping shipments. Like, yeah, that's what I would say to that. Because again, like they're still operating off of this calculus where like they're still operating off of this calculus of like the boomer vote, which is still important. But I mean, for the Democrats, it's like young people have been saying pretty, emphatically that we don't support this conflict, and we want a ceasefire. We want an end to the genocide, and they've just been completely dismissive towards us. I mean, as you can see, there's more appeal to Republican, anti-Trump Republicans. I mean, shit. I mean, they just did a whole fundraiser with Liz Cheney, and dude, like fucking Kamala Harris was saying, I just want to thank Dick Cheney for all he's done as vice president. It's just like, oh my god, like this is literally the most evil man in politics. Like, and this is what the Democrats are trying to appeal towards. This is unbelievable, man. Just crazy. What the fuck, man? So yeah, I mean, that's just at least what's again, like the ramifications here, like they try to act like this war is like inseparable. It's like, oh well, that's over there, but like we're deeply entrenched, and all the bombing is our bombs. Like this is not just like happening out of nowhere. Like, come on, man. It's just unbelievable. Like this is what we do on a regular basis, but then we act shocked when something like 9/11 happens. Again, like they're starting to bring back 9/11. Talking about the historical legacy of that, and it's like still people have this attitude of just like well, Osama bin Laden, he just hated our freedom, and it's just like like he was very clearly, like if you actually paid attention to his writings, and I'm not saying that Osama bin Laden is a good person, but like it's very clear that actually his contention with the U.S. was our imperialism. I mean, like he pretty much like went off the deep end during Desert Shield, the Desert Storm Wars, and the U.S. being allowed to set foot in Saudi Arabia because he was Saudi Arabian. Like that pretty much like put him on that path towards jihad and resistance to American imperialism. Again, he's a piece of shit. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm not saying that he's a good figure, but like that's why 9/11 happened, and it was because also our support towards Israel. That's, yeah, we're like, we get entrenched abroad, we create all this death and destruction, we support all these like radical figures, and then eventually, yeah, it bites us in the ass and it comes back to haunt us, and then we get stuff like 9/11 happening. But of course, we treat it like it's some random tragedy that just happened out of nowhere, and then we get more entrenched in the region and we further militarize. It's crazy, dude. It's crazy. Again, they treat October 7th like an extension of 9/11. Like the fucking, speech from Biden. It's like, proportionally speaking, this is really like, 9/11. So yeah, this is actually kind of worse. It's just so fucking stupid. Anyway, so that's at least some analysis here from that's some analysis here from the potential Lebanon operations and potential escalations that could occur. Again, I don't think right now things are going to escalate too quickly. I mean, who knows? Because Israel has to make a response to the Iranian attacks. But yeah, the whole idea of like mobilization towards a Lebanese war, considering other events in history, in their past, where Israel invaded Lebanon and it went horribly for them. Like, it just doesn't seem like it's going to work out for this. Again, they'll again, I'm not doubting that Israel can't kill a lot of people, but then what's the political outcome? What sort of advantage are they going to gain from invading Lebanon and dislodging Hezbollah? Right, they want to put them north of the Litani River. Like, what's going to happen? Because even if Israel somehow manages to do that, they manage to pacify Gaza, completely ethnically cleanse the population, and actually, dislodge Hezbollah, their economy is going to be in shambles. The whole world is going to see them for what they really are. They're going to be completely like permanently isolated on the world stage. They're going to be completely dependent in terms of like economic rebuilding on the U.S. more than ever before. It's just like, and then also, these normalization attempts, like, it might be permanently ruined, say like with Saudi Arabia. Like, I'm not doubting that MBS wants normal relations, but he has to take into account his population, and even like the most like autocratic, despot, like, they have to take their population into account. Like, it's just a fact of the matter. So like, yeah, man, like this is, Israel is a Pyrrhic victory. It's purely Pyrrhic. And this is truly the beginning of the end of Israel, being like this party town where like everybody was, this is we have the idiom, this is the Mali Percocet town, Tel Aviv, we party. Like, yeah, man, like that image is gone forever. And the only people who are gonna really, dedicate towards Israel are gonna be the hardline Zionists, who are, psychotic. they can't maintain a functional state. They're just gonna cannibalize each other. It's over. It's done. It's, man, unbelievable. I mean, like I said, Israel could very likely collapse within like the decade. Like, this is not sustainable. Crazy. And then also to think about all the people that, again, because like that's the other fucked up part too, because like these people are gonna leave Israel and they're gonna come here, and then we're gonna have to fucking live beside them, and then they're gonna be in the military and the police, and it's gonna get bad. Or like I've already seen some like reports of like they're gonna start establishing like private like militias and paramilitary groups that like the government's gonna support, because like, oh, there's a surge of anti-Semitic violence, so they need to establish their security groups, and it's just like bad news for what's coming. Like, I can certainly see these Israeli like the Israeli diaspora, which is kind of funny to say, but the Israelis, once Israel collapses, coming to the US and then basically becoming like an auxiliary force for the police state. So it's going to be like, imagine that you're going to see like Israeli exiles working alongside our own security forces, and it's just going to be fucking evil, like what's going to come. So yeah, man, it's crazy. So that's the Lebanon front. So I was talking about Hezbollah and Lebanon and Nasrallah being assassinated. So now I wanted to talk about the actual Iranian missile attack that occurred October 1st. Yeah, certainly a significant moment. Again, like so many people online were talking about Iran and saying like, oh, well, any moment now, yeah, nothing happens, nothing ever happens, treating it like a joke. And then something happened, and then of course they have to cope with that, and they have to be like, oh, well, it was a failure. It didn't affect anything. It barely killed a baby. Okay, like, so we've killed so many babies. Like, Iran can't even kill a single Israeli baby. Like, it's just crazy. Anyway, so this is Iran's attack, and again, like, this is just a signal. This is just a fraction of what they can do. This is just them trying to like highlight and trying to say very plainly, to back off, because yeah, they're serious about it. And it's just so crazy too, because like I was at work when it was happening, so it was just crazy to me to be like working with all these elderly people and serving them food and looking on my phone and seeing like missiles like fall out of the sky and hitting different bases on our Air Force base, right? The Nevatim Air Force Base. It's Yeah, man, like it's serious, like it's no joke. So, I mean, this is what I'll write here, or at least what I'll highlight here. So I'm reading from BBC, and of course, there's going to be mixed reporting because they're never going to truly report on the actual effect of it. But what I'll say is that this, the whole point of it, and again, this is of course also telegraphed. They still tried to like give some forewarning of what's coming, but again, this is just a signal to Israel, the United States, and the whole region. Like, this is what we're capable of, and you have to take us seriously because we can hit you with a limited operation like this. We can still hit you. Okay, so just imagine what like thousands or hundreds of thousands of missiles could do. It's not good. And then of course there's also the Iraqi militias. There's the Yemen, forces. There's Hezbollah, and even Hamas. Hamas is still launching rockets too. It's like, dude, if they wanted to all go at once, it's like there's no way. There's no way that they can stop everything. Like, it's just like, it's unbelievable. So anyway, so reading from BBC. So Iran launched almost 200 ballistic missiles towards Israel on Tuesday night. The Israeli military said most of the missiles were intercepted, but that a small number struck central and southern Israel. The only person reported to have been killed was a Palestinian man in the occupied West Bank. It was Iran's second attack on Israel this year after it launched about 300 missiles and drones in April. Here's what we know so far. So again, this article was written about 4 days ago, so I'm just highlighting on that. So what was the scale of Iran's attack? The IDF said the attack involved more than 180 missiles, which tallied with Iran state media reports saying about 200 missiles were launched. The U.S. said that the attack was nearly twice the scope of what happened in April. Sirens sounded as Israel's entire 10 million population was told to head into bomb shelters at about 19:30 local time on Tuesday. Social media videos verified by the BBC showed missiles flying over the densely populated cities of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem less than 15 minutes later. Explosions could be heard overhead as air defenses intercepted the incoming missiles. The footage also showed several missiles hitting areas around the Nevatim Air Base in the Negev Desert and the headquarters of the Mossad spy agency near Tel Aviv. Quote, there was a small number of hits in the center of Israel and other hits in southern Israel, end quote, said IDF spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari. Quote, the majority of the incoming missiles were intercepted by Israel and the defensive coalition led by the United States, end quote. The Israeli military confirmed on Wednesday some of its air bases had been hit during the attack, but said no weapons, aircraft, or critical infrastructure was damaged, and the Air Force's operational abilities were not affected. Iranian state media cited the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as saying the missiles hit Nevatim, Hatzarim, and Tel Nof air bases, as well as Israeli tanks in Netzarim, a reference to an Israeli military corridor in central Gaza, and gas installations in the southern city of Ashkelon. The semi-official Tasnim news agency said Iran had for the first time used Fatah hypersonic missiles that it claimed, quote, cannot be intercepted, end quote, as well as Emad and Qadr ballistic missiles. However, the IDF said that barrage did not include any hypersonic missiles, according to Israeli media. Alright, so continuing further, what damage and casualties have been reported? On Wednesday, the IDF said several Air Force bases were damaged in the missile attack, but that no aircraft were damaged, according to Israeli media reports. Quote, only administrative buildings and peripheral components were hit, end quote, the IDF was quoted as saying, while adding that, quote, upcoming missions remain unaffected, end quote. The IDF also reported that the damage to infrastructure and property in civilian areas was only minor and was likely to have been caused by shrapnel from intercepted missiles. Just north of Tel Aviv on Wednesday, close to the Mossad headquarters, a BBC correspondent found several badly damaged cars and a pile of earth next to a road where a missile impact was said to have caused a crater between 8 to 10 meters deep. The nearby municipality of Had Hashan also said about 100 homes were damaged by missile explosions and shrapnel. Quote, This was a very powerful impact with a huge risk of claiming human lives, end quote, the municipality said. And a video released by the IDF showed the head of its home front command visiting a school that was hit by a missile in the Gadara area, just to the east of Ashkelon, causing extensive damage to a classroom. Israel's Magen David Adom ambulance service paramedics treated 2 people with light injuries from shrapnel in the Tel Aviv area, as well as some people with minor injuries caused by falling as they moved to shelters. However, the Palestinian Civil Defense Authorities said a Palestinian man was killed when he was hit by falling missile shrapnel in the West Bank city of Jericho. CCTV footage showed a rear half of a large black missile plummeting directly on to a man as he walks along a road at night. It was not clear if the missile had been intercepted. The New York Times identified him as Sami al-Asali, a 37-year-old Palestinian construction worker from Gaza who had been sheltering in Jericho since the start of the war between Israel and Hamas last October. All right, so further paragraph. Were the missiles stopped by Iron Dome? The IDF has not provided details about how the missiles were shot down, besides saying that Israeli and U.S.-led forces were involved and that Israeli air defenses, quote, operated impressively with high rates of interception, end quote. It also did not say exactly how many were intercepted, explaining that it wanted to avoid, quote, giving Iran and Hezbollah information that will help them learn lessons, end quote. The IDF claimed that 99% of the Iranian projectiles launched in April's attacks were intercepted. Israel has a sophisticated system of air defenses, the best known of which is the Iron Dome. It is designed to intercept short-range rockets of the sort fired by Hamas and Hezbollah. While it was used to defend against some elements of Iran's last attack in April, other elements of the country's layered defense systems probably did the bulk of the work on Tuesday. David Sling, a joint U.S.-Israeli manufactured system, is used to intercept medium to long-range rockets as well as ballistic and cruise missiles. When it comes to long-range ballistic missiles which fly outside the Earth's atmosphere, Israel has the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 interceptors. The Pentagon said 2 U.S. Navy destroyers deployed in the Eastern Mediterranean fired a dozen interceptors as part of the effort to defend Israel, but that it was not known whether they took down any of the missiles. UK Defense Secretary John Healey said British forces had, quote, played their part in attempts to prevent further escalation, but the BBC understands the British military jets did not shoot down any Iranian missiles. Verified footage also showed missile interceptions over the Jordanian capital, Amman. The Arab Kingdom's forces also shot down a number of missiles during Iran's last attack in April. So, just reading here, at least there are missile defenses and ranges. So, reading here, right, Israel's air defense systems, missile distance range, the Iron Dome is up to 70 kilometers, David Sling is up to 300 kilometers, and the Arrow system is up to 2,400 kilometers. So that's the range, and then here's the altitude. So missile altitude, Iron Dome, it's about 10 kilometers. David Sling, 15 kilometers. And the Arrow system, 100 kilometers. So that's the altitude. So that's the capabilities there. And again, it's just very interesting that, you know, Israel alone, if Israel didn't have the US and the UK and all these Western forces and Jordan helping with this, they would have been in a much worse position. So again, let's not pretend that this is Israel, you know, doing all the heavy lifting. Like, this is, like, Israel desperately needs the US and the UK. And it's so crazy, like, the attitude that they have. Like, you know, there was recent, like, Macron comments about suspending arms shipments. And then Netanyahu's just having a hissy fit. It's just like, we are fighting barbarians. How dare you? We can fight without any support. It's just like, just so juvenile. I can't. But anyway, so right, here's Iran and the here's the next article. So right, so why did Iran attack Israel? Again, you know, it's like Iran makes these statements and they're like, hey, you killed Hania in our capital. You assassinated Nasrallah and you're expanding in Lebanon. You're not stopping the genocide. So these are the reasons why we're doing this. But still, why did Iran attack Israel? It's just like we can't figure it out. Such a mystery. So the IRGC said in a statement that the missile barrage was retaliation for what it called the, quote, violation of Iran's sovereignty and the martyrdom, end quote, of Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh, who was killed by an explosion in Tehran in July that Iranian officials blamed on Israel, but Israeli officials did not claim. The statement described the barrage as having been, quote, in line with the legitimate right of the nation to defend itself. It also said the attack was in response to the Israeli airstrike in the southern suburbs of Beirut last Friday that killed Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah and Brigadier General Abbas Nilforousan. The operations commander of the IRGC overseas arm, the Quds Force. A senior Iranian official told Reuters news agency the country's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, had personally given the order for Tuesday's missile attack. The escalation also came hours after Israeli troops began an invasion of southern Lebanon to remove what the military said were Hezbollah terror targets in border villages that pose a threat to residents of northern Israel. Israel has gone on the offensive against the Shia Islamist political and military organization after almost a year of cross-border hostilities sparked by the war with Hamas in Gaza. Both Hezbollah and Hamas are backed by Iran and designated as terrorist organizations by Israel, the US, the UK, and others. Iran does not recognize Israel's right to exist and seeks its eradication. It has spent years building a network of armed groups across the Middle East known as Axis of Resistance, which are opposed to Israel and the United States. Israel believes that Iran poses an existential threat and has spent years engaged in the shadow war with Iran that is now increasingly out in the open. How has Israel reacted? Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told a cabinet meeting on Tuesday night that Iran's military attack failed, having been, quote, thwarted thanks to Israel's air defense array. Quote, Iran made a big mistake tonight and it will pay for it, he added. The regime in Iran does not understand our determination to defend ourselves and our determination to retaliate against our enemies. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant also vowed vengeance. Quote, Iran has not learned a simple lesson. Those who attack the state of Israel pay a heavy price, end quote, he said in a statement. Okay, and I want to go over here over Iran's ballistic missile arsenal. So they have here the Shahab missile, which has a range of 300 kilometers or 186 miles. The Fateh 110, which is 300 to 500 kilometers or 186 to 310 miles. The Shahab 2, 500 kilometers, 310 miles. The Zolfagar, 700 kilometers, 434 miles. The Qiyam, 750 kilometers, 466 miles. And then the Shahab 3, which is 2,000 kilometers, 242 miles. So, right, that is their array. I mean, Iran is perfectly positioned to just dominate the region. Because again, like, this is, if we're going to talk about ancient history, this is the Silk Road, right? This is the gateway between China, the East, and the Middle East, and ultimately into Western Europe. Like, Iran is strategically placed on these trade routes, especially with the oil industry, oil and gas trade routes, the Strait of Hormuz. They can also affect the Red Sea. And of course, there's Yemen in the Red Sea. Like, they really have influence and they really have power projection here. And again, people keep, treating it like it's a joke. That like Iran is just like some backwater, like, I mean, sure, there's poverty for sure, but like they're highly developed. Their economy is certainly developing. And their military now is becoming more, effective and more, they're supporting all these different proxy militias in the region. Like, this is just, this is just the reality of our situation, where Iran is becoming a regional power. This is just the fact of the matter. This has always been their history. And, of course, the United States and Israel, they can't stand it that, like, another country is actually, like, asserting their influence in the region. So it's just like, there's like that meme where it's like, look at Iran posing, so aggressively with all their bases in the region. It's just like, it's just unreal. Again, this has always been the wet dream of the imperialists since the 70s, to go for Iran. The whole point of invading Iraq was to build a staging ground for the eventual Iran war, but of course that fell apart. Yeah, man, like, this is crazy. It's just crazy to think about. And it's so funny that Iran, they talk about the theocratic regime of Iran, but it's like, they exist, the Shah and the theocratic regime exists explicitly because of American intervention and meddling. It's just like, so you guys created them, basically. Again, there's just no foresight. So, right. So just wrapping up here, because I've gone on with this article, but just finishing the final paragraphs. So what has been the international reaction? U.S. President Joe Biden reaffirmed U.S. support to Israel after the missile attack, describing it as defeated and ineffective. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin also condemned what he called, quote, this outrageous act of aggression by Iran, end quote. UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said the UK stood with Israel and recognized her, quote, right to self-defense. France and Japan also condemned Iran's attack, but also called on all parties to avoid further escalation. And then continuing, did Iran warn the U.S. that it was going to attack? The U.S. told Israel before the attack that it had intelligence indicating that Iran was preparing to launch ballistic missiles imminently, which allowed the IDF to warn Israeli citizens to be prepared to seek shelter. However, U.S. officials said that after the attack, that they had received no warning from the Iranian government. Iran's mission to the UN also said in a statement, no notice was given to the United States prior to our response. The Wall Street Journal, citing Arab officials in the region, saying that Iran, quote, telegraphed to Arab countries on Monday night that it was going to launch an attack similar in scale to April's. The officials also said Israel had sent clear messages back to Iran that it would respond to any attack on Israeli territories with strikes that targeted Iranian nuclear or oil facilities. And then what happens next? So the IDF Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Herzi Haveli, said, quote, we will choose when to exact the price and demonstrate our precise and surprising offensive capabilities in accordance with the directive of the political echelon, end quote. Axios cited Israeli officials as saying that Israel's response would be, quote, significant, and that it could target oil production facilities inside Iran and other strategic sites. Some analysts suggested that Iran's nuclear facilities could also be targeted. President Biden said the U.S. was, quote, fully supportive of Israel and that we would discuss a response with Israel's prime minister. But Biden made clear that he saw any Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear sites as off limits. Asked by reporters whether he would support such an attack, he said, quote, the answer is no, end quote. The IRGC warned that Iran's response would be, quote, crushing if Israel dared to retaliate. Israel responded to April's attack by launching a missile that hit an air defense battery at an Iranian airbase, following Western calls for restraint. So that is the article there. So, yeah, I certainly spoke at length about the different developments and escalations. I mean, dude, there's just so much to keep up with. And I probably missed quite a bit, but I wanted this to be a specific, October 7th, Palestine genocide, episode, and also highlighting the recent events. Because, again, so much has happened. I mean, dude, there's potentially hundreds of thousands that have died in Gaza. It's insane. Unbelievable. Dude, and then not just that, the normalization within daily life, and just, there's some people who don't really keep up with it because they just, the shock and trauma of it is overwhelming, and I get it. I certainly can recognize that. But there's just other people who really don't give a shit. They do not care. It's just hard for me, and it certainly affected the way that I kind of interact and socially. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, dude, because of course you have to be very careful with the things you say. This is why I do my program, to at least be unfiltered and just, vent, and just get this off of my chest, and actually air out these thoughts, because like you can't just like sit with them. It's like bouncing around in your head. You gotta say something, but of course you can't always say it to I think my problem is just like mainly I just haven't found the right people, and I know there's certainly, I'm probably gonna have to move back to Houston, and I'm gonna have to look to, I don't know, maybe the Houston DSA or some other organization, because I really need now to step into more organization, more activism. Because again, I'm just a poster. I just talk shit. It's just, there's a certain point where you got to start, coordinating. That's why I kind of want to keep my head low. But yeah, man, like it's gonna be hard, when I eventually do move back, and just the way that so many people, especially in the suburbs, it's just a whole different world, again, especially with white folks, they don't really think about it, but that's because they can afford to. They can afford not to think about it. And then of course, if you're constantly bringing it up, and oh well, you're bringing down my mood, man, they just slowly slip away. And anyway, it's just all about positivity and vibes and aesthetic, and it's all fake, it's all bullshit. There's like people really dying right now, but of course, because they're never gonna experience or even relate with that, they can afford to ignore it. The reason why I can't ignore it is because I come from, I have a heritage of being, my ancestors being colonized and enslaved. So, when I look at people in Gaza and Lebanon getting bombed, I see myself. Because obviously I'm not a colonizer, or, I live in a colonial state, but I don't directly benefit from that colonial extraction of wealth and resources. Because again, being a colonizer is like, it's a material position. It's like you're explicitly of a privileged class where you directly benefit from that extraction of wealth and resources. So yeah, of course I'm not gonna sympathize or relate with Israel, because like I'm not a colonizer. I don't directly live in a position of comfort and stability and privilege. But yeah, man, that's why like so many people, especially in the US, a lot of suburban liberals and Democrats, they're just constantly like ride or die for Israel. Like, I'm reminded now of Ta-Nehisi Coates, right? He has the recent video, or the recent book that came out, The Message, and I need to get more familiar with his writings, and I need to read more in general. It's just, I do enough reading online, but yeah, it's it was just interesting to see him go on his press tour, doing different interviews. And of course, his book has a section about Palestine, and his experiences in the West Bank. And he was talking on CBS with Tony Dukoppel. And of course, this guy was, he's more pro-Israeli. I think he's Jewish. Pretty sure he is. I think he had like a weird, like sort of article about having an adult circumcision, or like a bloodletting ceremony. It was weird. Anyway, but like he was on this interview with Ta-Nehisi Coates, and like he's just coming out the gate, and he's just like, I'm just particular about this section because you sound like an extremist, and it sounds like you don't support Israel's existence. And it's just like, again, like any sort of humanization of Palestine is just a threat, and immediately it's like, well, clearly you want to kill all Jews. And like, Ta-Nehisi Coates is like, listen, man, like I come from the South, like I'm a civil rights activist, so of course I'm not going to support apartheid. Like, it's crazy, man. And this is what I mean. The BLM sort of pro-black, liberation and emancipation. Like that's like a pet project for a lot of white liberals in America, where it's like, well, of course I don't support Jim Crow, and of course I want to support BLM, even though we're still going to support the police and arm them and give all kinds of funding. So it's like even for like American black liberal, or even for like black American like civil rights issues, they're still pro-police ultimately. It's so fucking stupid. But now, of course, now it's on to Israel, and this is where they're gonna, like, I mean, you might as well be talking to like, some right-wing Trump supporter. It's like, well, clearly, well, okay, I shouldn't say that, because Trump supporters aren't even, I mean, they're very anti-Semitic. So it's like you see that sort of like militarism and that sort of American exceptionalist attitude, or like pro-Zionist attitude, where it's like, oh well, clearly you want to kill all Jews, and like he has all this. I mean, again, he has like a lot of capital, social and political capital within the liberal establishment. So to see that switch up, again, like I'm sure for him, like it's no surprise because this is what happens to like, especially people of color, where like if you step out of line for one moment, all that goodwill that you've built goes out the window, and now you're an adversary. And of course, we're gonna see that now. Yeah, man. Again, like I'm sure that Ta-Nehisi Coates, he wants liberation for Palestinians, but then of course at the same time he's gonna call Hamas and Hezbollah terrorist groups. But it's like you can't have Palestinian liberation without armed resistance. Like it's just it can't happen. And this is the conditions that Israel has created. Okay, no, Israel has nobody to blame but themselves. So yeah, man, it's just crazy to think about. It's crazy to think about, and of course, the hypocrisy of the political American liberal establishment is on full display. Not that it would really matter, because like they don't care. They're gonna say and believe whatever they want. So it's just like, oh, man, what do we do? But yeah, man, like this is gonna have serious consequences for the upcoming election. I wanted this to be a dedicated, Palestine, Israel episode. And yeah, it's a little shorter, because of course like my episodes have been like 5-6 hours long. This one's a little shorter, a little quicker. Hopefully I can edit it and release it quicker. And then I'll release another episode, specifically on domestic electoral politics. Although I do want to talk about like natural events, because like we just had Hurricane Helene and the damage from that. Especially in like the Appalachian regions. I mean, like it's apocalyptic. Excuse my phone. It's apocalyptic. And then now we have Hurricane Milton, which has just rapidly intensified from a Category 1 storm yesterday, and within less than 24 hours, honestly, it is now rapidly intensified to a Category 5. And then it's actually now, as I'm recording, around 4:30 p.m. 4:30 p.m. October 7th, 2024, Hurricane Milton is now recorded at 180 miles an hour. So this is crazy. Like I don't like, what the fuck. Let me actually look at the national weather reports here. Right, yeah, unbelievable. And it's expected to make landfall. Let me see here. So around Thursday. So yeah, Wednesday night into Thursday. That's when it's expected to make landfall in the Tampa Bay area. And this was recently hit by, I always get it confused, but is it Hurricane Ian? Hold on. Yeah, so Hurricane Ian, which effectively hit the same region. Yeah. No, it actually hit a little south of it. See the impact. Hold on, let me read here. Florida. Yeah, so yeah, closer to Cape Coral and Fort Myers. So it's a little more to the south. So yeah, it's actually expected to hit. I mean, it still had an effect in the Tampa Bay area. So now they're expecting it to hit more directly into Tampa Bay. Still though, I mean, like pretty much the whole of Florida is going to get flooded out. And it's going to be a Category 5, disaster. Dude, this is fucking insane. Insane. It's so crazy that like all these red states are getting the most affected by these hurricanes. And it's like you have the government, Ron DeSantis, right? Who's a climate denier. But it's like you might deny the climate, but all these insurance companies, they don't deny it. So it's going to get bad. This is just so bad. But anyway, that's for a later episode. I wanted this to be more focused on Israel, Palestine. But yeah, man, what a year. And as horrible as things have been for Gaza, as horrifying as the American actions have been and the Israeli actions have been, in a lot of ways this had to happen. It had to happen. Again, America and Israel have pushed people to the breaking point. There's no other option. They didn't give people an option, so they have to fight. If you're going to conduct violence and genocide, steal people's land, ruin their lives, kill their families, then yeah, naturally they're going to respond back, and they're going to try to kill, as many people as they want in response as they can. And this has been the case again. October 7th have happened all throughout history. All kinds of colonial people, colonized people, indigenous people in America. The Haitian Revolution, right? Which is interesting now. People were talking about Haitians in this recent presidential election. Like the racist attitudes toward the Haitians, it's really never been gone away. Like if you actually examine the attitudes of the Haitian Revolution during the period, like they were freaking out. All these white people were freaking out, and it's the same attitude today. Like they hate the Haitians, even though like the Haitians fought for their liberation and their freedom, but they hate the Haitians because they represent what black people in America can accomplish. And of course, as we're seeing now, like, black people in America, of course, things have been better, obviously, but there's still very real, like, oppression and systemic violence against, these communities of color. Anyway, that's the whole, I'm getting off topic, because, like, I can go on another tangent about this, but I'm gonna, save that for my more domestic episode that I'll record in like, maybe a week or two, considering developments, what transpires. But yeah, that's just, talking specifically about Israel and the region, the Iran escalations. Now they're expanding into Lebanon, which is going to be a disaster for them, because they're going to try to do a limited operation, but they're already getting hit hard. So they have two options: either to back down, which is not going to happen, they can't do that, or further escalate and further mobilize, which is going to just further eat away at their operational capacity, especially in Gaza. They're already getting tied down there. It's just like there's no good outcome for this. Okay, like what political advantage if Israel actually manages to like pacify Gaza and Hezbollah? Like what their political standing is going to be worse. Their economic standing is going to be worse. Like the U.S. standing is going to be worse, because like everybody's going to hate them and they're going to kill so many people. It's just, yeah, man, unbelievable. Again, it's just like it's empire or nothing. Even if like, again, there's no like pragmatic people, telling them, hey, like this is going to lead to disaster. This is an untenable situation. We need a diplomatic exit. Like they don't want to hear that. They want to hear how we can maintain a military advantage and how we can, maintain our empire. And yeah, that's all they want. That's all they want to hear. It's just, oh my goodness, man. And yeah, Kamala Harris, this new administration, they're not gonna step back from that. And again, I said some positive things about Tim Walz the last episode, mainly for his like domestic, policies in Minnesota, wholesome Midwest dad. But then of course, yeah, foreign policy wise, empire, so he's still, it's nothing's changing. It's just crazy. Anyway, I think I've spoken at length. And yeah, as I said, I was sort of like under the weather, so hopefully my voice hasn't been too off. Again, I'm not like a professionally trained like voice, speaker, so like, yeah, my voice is gonna crack sometimes. I try to prevent that or edit it out, but it happens. But yeah, that's this episode here. So hopefully at least the shorter run time is more manageable for y'all. But I have a lot to say, and I don't have the equipment for like live streaming, and I certainly need to diversify my content online. And I wish I could do a little more research into history subjects, but I do enough work, and it's just like, yeah, sometimes I just need to relax. But yeah, anyway, so that's this episode here. Let's hope that nothing escalates before I can release. So we'll see. We will see. But yeah, I appreciate y'all tuning in here, and hoping for the best. Again, whatever situation you're dealing with, just power through it. I'm certainly doing my best to get through day-to-day life. But yeah, man, I really appreciate y'all tuning in. Love you guys. Stay safe. Hopefully we don't have a world war before the election, but we'll see. Thank you.